All right. I'll try to. No, this is. Oh, yeah. Well, I'll put it here. All right. Hello and welcome at Focusstrap, a digital accessibility podcast. My name is Damen, and I'm joined today by Quinten Balsdon, technology advocate at Evinst. Welcome, Quinten.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me.
So nice that you are able to join us. We are hosting podcast online, which is very nice. Of course, you're calling from the UK, I believe, right?
That is correct. Yeah, I'm in Southeast London.
Nice. That's nice. Going to kick off with signature question. I can say now. What does digital accessibility mean to you?
Well, to me, it really means including people from a vast arena or spectrum of ability to be able to independently use apps and devices and be able to participate in society, really. So it ranges from things like banking, entertainment, everything. As many people should be able to do anything independently. It's kind of like it's the gap of what a lot of developers usually miss, which is like they usually develop stuff for themselves rather than for the wider variety of people.
Yeah, indeed. No, we are living more online, or online services are widely available, of course, almost over the services we used to have offline, becoming more and more online. So being able to participate in this online world is very, very important, of course. And this is also what started your journey in accessibility. Is it part of the reason you started advocating for it this much?
Yeah, like it was the platform formerly known as Twitter. It was a few years ago. I was just kind of scrolling through. I think I just joined, and I was contracted out to a bank at the time, and we were kind of frustrated with accessibility, especially just screen readers, because that's all you thought that accessibility was. And I read a tweet where somebody said, they were talking about how an epileptic service dog will go and look for attention from someone when the owner needs help. And people were just like interacting with the dog as if it just wanted attention. And they were frustrated with this, very rightly so frustrated with this. And I was like, but how are you supposed to know as a layman who doesn't know? And I love the idea of trying to get involved and trying to help on a greater scale. And it gave me more meaning at the bank that I was working at, because, if you're just moving money from A to B, it's kind of boring, but you can inject meaning into your work by seeing it as making people independent.
Yeah,
and that was
definitely.
that really started a whole spiral of inspiration for me.
Yeah, no, indeed. And how do you see, for example, this? Do you see, for example, a banking app you used in your just now, a banking app, as it was developed at the time you were there, and inaccessibly developed? Do you now see this as a complete product, as a complete feature?
What, accessibility?
Well, no,
or
the banking app that was not accessible at the time.
It was unfortunately
Yeah.
a cross-platform, and it was a mix of cross-platform and native. So the screen reader would actually change accent from when it was in the native stuff to the cross-platform stuff. So it was really not good. And it's interesting because when you develop apps, when you start seeing things that you don't like, you should really work on it, right? You should really do something about it. And so we started that, and now the app is completely changed. Thank goodness, it is now a much more accessible app, pretty much because it was rewritten from scratch using more standard components and not a hack together thing. So thankfully that has changed, and that was many years ago as well. Thankfully.
Yeah, no, indeed. But this was your journey into getting started with accessibility. This was your
Yeah,
first.
that's really my first introduction was kind of these two things happening at the same time. Being very afraid of screen readers, and I'm an Android engineer from back in the day. Being very afraid of screen readers, how to use them, turning them off is the biggest problem for someone like me. Uh, and then just learning all the gestures, learning how people actually use them. But then I got roped into trying to automate things because I'm a huge fan of test-driven development. So writing reliable, deliverable code is something I'm really interested in. And when we got put on the National Health Service app for the COVID-19 pandemic, I got put on the Android accessibility side of things, and we were really trying to be a triple A level compliant app. So it was really cool taking the audit from auditors and being able to say, we've got to fix all of these things. I didn't have to question, whether it was triple A, double A, single A. I could just go with it and learn as I went and try to implement everything. And that was really cool.
Wow. Yeah, I think this sounds like a really great project to. Well, of course, first this is what's broadly used, so
Mm.
the audience was as broad as possible.
Yeah,
Everyone needed to be included, so this is, I think,
absolutely.
good selling point for making for saying, okay, this needs to be as accessible as possible, of course.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds great. And
Yeah.
how did this go?
Well, it saved a lot of lives, which was amazing. The most disappointing thing, especially from an Android point of view, is because of the fragmentation, a lot of people were excluded purely because of the cost of their devices. So, like, if you can't afford a device with Bluetooth Low Energy, you then couldn't be included in the app, and that was a sad reality to kind of face. So dealing with that was difficult, but it was enjoyable to see the accessibility of it come through. And there were other ways that people could participate aside from the app. So it wasn't app alone. So that was at least useful, but cumbersome when you weren't on the app.
Yeah. The app was the go-to, I think, and it's very accessible to make also non technical options available, of course, which probably you did in terms of the COVID app. But
Yeah, and the
how
team
did
was
the
amazing.
yeah how did the project end up? How accessible or not did you end up?
We got double A plus rated, and I think it was the first app. It's got a weird. It had a weird accreditation or something. It was like medical device as an application or something. It had a weird term, but it was the first one of that kind
Mm.
in either in the UK or something like that. But it was a very cool app that everybody knew. Whether they liked it or not is another story. But it was designed to protect lives, and uh, from a scientific point of view, we've documented and published research that showed that it did save lives. So very cool from
Well,
that
I
area.
think great project, and
Yeah.
this probably also kickstarted your accessibility journey. Can imagine that you've
Yeah, that
learned
put
a
it into
lot.
hyperdrive. Yeah. I then really got into using all the different assistive tech. I really wanted to see what I could code, and Android being so open source and
Mm.
available to a bit of hackery and that kind of thing, not in terms of the final product, but in terms of how you develop and discover things, was super, super useful.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
for iOS side, it's more protected and more not as open to for this hackery stuff.
Yeah.
I can imagine, and
Yeah,
so
and Windows stuff as well. I mean, not to point the finger at Apple specifically, but like just TalkBack for Android, for example, is completely open source. You could download the code and deliver your own screen reader with your own little tricks in it to try and discover things. Like I have a version that I added commands to it for developers that they could use from the terminal to control how the focus works, aside from having to know the gestures. And then I put it into a user interface. So I made essentially a interactable cheat sheet where you don't have to use the gestures to do the actions. You just click buttons inside the IDE. And that's because it's just completely open source and freely available to do. And yeah, and really cool to play around with that. And it saves a lot of time because you like all the in knowing where these settings are, how to change them. And it's not just screen reader, but just the whole ecosystem. It's very cool.
yeah, I can imagine. I can, and also my initial thought was that iOS was more the more accessible option. But I think with Android you can go into if you want, and if you do it, then you can go more into detail. Now that I think about it, so you can end up with an even more accessible app.
I think the opportunities for accessibility are fantastic. And I love the idea of having like an accessibility arms race to like get who can be more accessible. I think Apple definitely has a culture of accessibility that dives a lot deeper than what Android folks do. So even though I think Android can be more accessible, I think Apple folks practice it more. From what I've seen in communities, it's not always the rule.
I see. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's actually so. I'm more like a front end developer, so I'm more into web development.
All right.
But speaking to native developers, it's to me it's really strange because the web is unified, right? But with native, there's like the Android side and the iOS side, right? How
Yeah.
that
And they're completely different operating systems and different ways of working. I think one of the big mistakes that people make is they just call it mobile, and it's like that's not how this works at all. It's it's two completely different fields. Yeah,
yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine.
and Apple does some really cool stuff, like just out of the box, like the whole operating system, for example, controls your keyboard focus color. So if you don't need to do that. But Android has the idea of accessibility services. You could totally write one. I've tried unsuccessfully too, but you can do it for folks if you so desire. Yeah.
That's awesome. And as an Android developer, I get the feeling that for example, as a web developer, front end developer, in once you get started in your career, at some point you have the feeling, okay, I know about this thing called accessibility. I see some area labels surrounding my code, and I see so at some point you know about accessibility, but some people just tend not to get into it or don't. Is it the same thing with Android or native
Oh
developers, you'd
yeah.
say? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it can become overwhelming very quickly. And sometimes you see inklings of it and you don't realize that you're seeing it. Like I believe everybody actually does work on accessibility. Everybody knows about it. They just don't realize the extent to which they know about it. So for example, if you make a button that's too small to click, they'll make it bigger so that they can click it as a developer, but they don't realize that someone who's less confident on their motor skills or their hand-eye coordination isn't as good, they don't they might think to make the button bigger for those people, but they might not think why, and they might not know how big. And it's the same for color contrast. I remember as an engineer, I hate choosing colors but at least with color contrast, I know what colors not to pick. And I think accessibility provides amazing guardrails in that respect.
Yeah,
It
for
it
sure.
it it, it actually means that there's some rules you can apply that you can even automate that will help you choose things that will get you there better. But I think a lot of people see accessibility, especially when they look at the web content accessibility guidelines and all of that. It can be very overwhelming to like try and take all of this on at once, and you end up feeling like it's this sort of gremlin in a cupboard that you're scared to open the cupboard kind of thing. And you want to, and not only the criteria, but then the testing of it, all the assistive tech and all the settings and stuff. Like for switch access, how are you supposed to get access to switches and know that you're doing it right? You can watch tutorials online, but there's such a wealth of experience out there from actual disabled people that you can learn from. That's just amazing.
Yeah. And is it
But
something
it's
you
big.
used to do often or still doing? Is
I still
testing
do.
together with users?
Yeah, testing with users is paramount to me. Like, I don't believe that I use the tech right until I've seen someone using it. Because I used to, for example, with voice control, because of my South African accent, these voice control systems are not designed for me. And when I try to say it, I scream at my phone, swipe down, swipe down. And it turns out you need to say scroll down. And that articulation of the scroll helps it a lot. And
I see.
yeah, and I got that from watching users actually use the stuff.
Yeah, even small things like this can be of great value, right?
Yeah,
And also getting into the realm, you eventually get also into the realm of like preferences. Some
yeah,
users tend to like this more, some users tend to like
yeah.
this more, and then you, yeah, of course, you need to eventually, um, based on these things that you see, make the right decision. But yeah, I think well that's
Yeah, I
still.
think it's huge because trying to give people the options that suit them, like Android's very good at, for example, the time to react or time to take action setting. Like you can, from an operating system perspective, say, I need extra time. One of the more disappointing things about that setting is inside the setting in Android, it says, hey, developers might not know about this, so it might not happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to talk about that setting every time I get an opportunity because that is such a lovely way for you to get some information from your user without having them to program a setting in your app.
No,
Yeah.
definitely. And is that's like a default Android feature that you can enable easily when
Yeah, in your accessibility settings, there's
ah
a time to take action, I think is what it's called.
great that you mentioned it. Um, talking about bigger organizations. I think we both have some experience working for big organizations with lots of different engineering teams, for example.
Yeah.
Um, and my feeling is that when the teams that if there are more teams, more and more teams, it will get harder and harder to um, come up with a reliable way of building accessible features. Um, yeah, how do you see this?
Well, I think training is an amazing thing to do with folks, and not to you shouldn't really just push them into here's a screen reader, go ahead. I think the biggest thing from my perspective that's changed minds is explaining to engineers that what the social model really is. Like that problems don't emit from the user. A user is not a problem generator in terms of your app. Your user is trying to get the job done. And the social model says it's not their fault if they're using a tool or a setting to help them get that job done through your app. Rather than expecting them to be fixed, which is what the medical model says, we should make sure that our experiences cater to a wider variety of people and a wider variety of settings and services that already exist on the phone. So I think training in its positioning in the business environment and education environment, I think education is severely lacking when it comes to accessibility, but like training is the right time, because if you try to push this on a developer while they're under pressure to deliver, not only are they going to push back, but their product managers are going to push back, because they're under pressure, and learning anything new, being faced with anything new encumbers them quite a lot. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it because it's important, but it's just understand you're naturally going to get more friction from them when they're busy trying to release and under high pressure. The best time is to offer some training, get them in early, get them understanding the reasoning behind it. And I think rewarding is also like celebrating the wins. Like, this is great, this works well, is a fantastic way of giving feedback. Not only, when you're giving bad feedback, like, hey, this is great, but this isn't, and this is how we fix it. I think that's another thing, is you can alleviate a lot of pressure by saying, here's how you fix it. I've done that with a lot of teams where I will go in and fix the first thing, but I won't fix the next 6 or 7 things. Even though I technically could, they need to learn it, and they need to know how to do it for themselves. And so in previous companies, that's what I've done, is I do the template example fix, or I'll pair with them on the fix and then let them ride with it. And I found successful instances of that is where I've been very explicit on how they should fix it. Like, this is what code looks like that is accessible. And then they love it. I got a team fixing like 10 issues a day. And I said to them, how do I get more people to do this? And they're like, well, now that we know what to do, it's just easy. And
Yeah,
that
right.
was great.
Most
that
of
was
the
great
time,
feedback.
you can fix certain. Well, I believe a lot of fixes can be done in 1 or 2 lines of code. The low hanging fruit for sure.
There's a lot of low hanging fruit though that's in control of the developer.
Yeah, doing it right is not such a small effort. You just need to know the little details that come into play when you are building something, and that needs to be if you are trying to build accessibly.
I think the highest amount of friction is when you get into discussions about numbers of users and that kind of thing. Because like for font scaling, sorry, my accent, for text scaling, if you start saying, oh, we need a certain, how many users actually need this or whatever, developers don't actually make those kinds of monetary decisions. So why they're asking is also a question, but usually that's a pushback question that is focused in the wrong area, and you're arguing about the wrong thing. Even though with things like text resizing, you can actually say it's something about 20% of your users, that normally that's not enough to convince them. Whereas if you actually demonstrate that there's potential harm here and that users have a right to these things and it's an ethical thing, that's a far more convincing discussion to be having than when you're trying to talk about numbers. And some numbers you just can't get, and some numbers are far lower.
Yeah.
And
I would
and it's
even
also a matter of
I would even go one step further and say it's a human right to
exactly
have accessible apps, especially living
also,
in
you can't measure the
2025.
users you don't have. If you
Yeah,
don't cater to those users, you'll never get them. So counting them is kind of superfluous.
No, indeed. And also the thing that stuck with me that you said is the thing I try to do and from my day-to-day work, try to focus on the most currently is sharing getting the knowledge inside of the engineering teams that need to create new features. Of course, working agile teams constantly are creating new features, right?
Yeah.
There's a big backlog in many
Yeah.
planning apps scattered throughout the world, probably with lots of new features to build. And most of the time, unfortunately, it's still the case. And the new features that are added to apps and web apps are not built accessibly.
Yeah.
Actually, trying to change this into engineers building accessibly, because of course it can be a strategy to go back and fix the current state, right? The current state of the app,
Yeah.
and try to fix all of the problems that
The
currently
expensive
are,
way.
yeah, the expensive way. But if you don't educate the engineering teams, if you don't build the processes, add the processes so that um, new features are built accessibly, I think that should be the focus, and not so much like focusing on trying to fix the older already existing problems within the app, because these will eventually come. But actually, looking forward is the thing that I'm trying to do. So when you said I will show them one good example, and then the rest I will maybe you point to it, or you would say, okay, here, and here, and here. You should have a look at and try to do it yourself. This is actually, I think, a really good and nice strategy to do it. And it's also how I'm trying to well slowly but surely educate engineering teams surrounding me.
Yeah. I mean,
So that,
also, what you could do is start writing tests for that stuff, right? This is one thing that I love about Jetpack Compose in Android, the new way of defining user interfaces. There are a lot more, there's been a lot more consideration towards the accessibility APIs that you can write really nice tests to maintain that behavior so that you can see that behavior was intentional. But all of this boils down to just good engineering practice. It's not even really accessibility. It's
mm,
it's about making sure you know what questions to ask at refinement, and that it gets into your definition of done, or what definition of ready is on your ticket, and make sure that it's that the testing cycle, it's just been included, right? It really is just a matter of practice, and anything that takes practice, once you get good at it, it takes a few minutes.
yeah, no, indeed. And getting into maybe automation. So automating, of course. I think automation, how I see it currently, is you can do two things. There are like general automation, and you have context specific automation, I would say. So the context specific would be in the context of your organization, in the context of your specific application that you are trying to build. Of course, there are differences in building something accessibly that can be automated, but that they are specific to your context. Um, and I think there are possibilities to also automate in this way, but also general things. So how should a button behave, um, or other types of like more general stuff?
Yeah, I think that's
How
the
how
power of design systems as well, right? Is when you have a design system in place, even if it isn't accessible right from the outset, teams can get going working on stuff. It's part of a parallel development effort that before release, components, at least on a component level, things get accessible before the release. And then it's not an individual's job, it's everyone's job together. And that's really a powerful thing.
yeah, indeed, and this everyone's job together. So what would you starting maybe before the design is made, until the tester is done testing, and production release is made. There's a whole development cycle in between, of course. And what would you say is a good strategy to get everyone on board and get started with building accessible?
Get everyone on board in the beginning.
Yeah. So, for example, a complete engineering team would exist of designers, engineers, business analysts, testers. So starting all the way from the start of a development life cycle, you could, for example, start in front before the design is even made until after the testing is done and production release is ready. Integrating accessibility in every step is I think is something you would aim for if you try to level up your maturity level. And it's I think the way to go if you try to stay and try to build accessibly in a sustainable way. But how would you go and integrate this into the development lifecycle? What would be your strategy?
Well, I think number one is employ people with disabilities.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need someone who has identified or, put themselves out there, but they need to be able, you need someone who's going to advocate. Because if you don't know, you don't know. And those are the most dangerous unknowns, right? So you do need someone who is knowledgeable or at least acknowledges accessibility. People with lived experience are the best. Second best is an advocate. And then, I think as with all things, right? If people consider it to be a nice to have, they will throw it out. And so how to, energize people and get them involved and get them keen and help them understand the priority, that really comes with facing the right people. And I think that really comes with facing the right people and including them in the whole life cycle. So without people who are representative of our user base included in our development process, I don't think we're really going to achieve the depth of accessibility that we really want to see. But I also understand statistically, it's difficult to find a screen reader user who's a Kotlin engineer. And so, it becomes a matter of training. And I really think that our education system needs to include digital accessibility as part of any software engineering course. I think that's businesses are actually undertaking a lot more than they necessarily should in terms of that kind of training. And it's something that the disability community has said for years is nothing about us without us, right? And so making sure that they are included either in testing, development, research. And that's actually another area that a lot of people don't really consider is a big organization should really start with measurement. They should say, how much of our user research includes people with disabilities? How much of our design system caters for what are our gaps there? And what are our gaps in terms of the app? And you need to take stock first to understand the sort of scale of the problem. But that doesn't mean you can't start. You can say things like, hey, let's work on what we can. Let's tell the developers to just work on role name value. Just from today, let's have a session, talk to them about role name value, how it works, why it's important, and let's put it in the acceptance criteria. Let's tell designers they need to put headings.
Yeah, what you mentioned, and integrating this into the university studies.
Yeah.
I think there's also part to do for tutorial YouTube creators as well. Integrating this, mentioning it during a tutorial. All right,
Yeah.
actually caring about it. Because
There's a lot of opportunity
starting
for
out,
influencers, right? I'd
yeah,
love to see. There are a few influencers that are out there that are very cool. There's carry on accessibility. It's Carrie. She does a lot of screen reader and magnifying YouTube videos. So she's a very, very cool one to watch and experience. And she does reviews on products that I wouldn't even begin to know how to use. But she's very awesome. Yeah.
oh, that's great. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, what I think I see things moving, because if I look, for example, to universities here over in the Netherlands, front end, but also UX related studies are focusing more and more on accessibility, which is a nice thing to see, and we're going in the right direction here. But also visibility on conferences or on online YouTube tutorials, crash courses. There is some work to do, I would say.
And
But
I think presenting it as a separate thing is often the problem. Often, if you look at documentation, it's here's how you do a button. And then in some hidden corner of this documentation, oh, here's all the accessibility stuff you need to know. You wouldn't do that with security. You wouldn't say, here's how you do a password field, and then hide it in another field, how to actually hide it in, or just obscure it in the documentation, how to make it a password field. You tell them straight away. So why accessibility isn't a part of that, I'm not 100% sure.
this is so nice. I love to compare security with accessibility a lot, because, for example, working for a bank, for example, security is like up really like top priority, I would say. But accessibility is on a lower end. I think they should level more. Of course, well, hackers and it's very important to have a secure system. That's
And I
for
think
sure.
that's super important, because if you make
Yeah.
something accessible and you open up a security holder as a result, that could be a problem.
Yeah. No, but I hope accessibility is going into the direction of security as well, because with security you also have a lot of processes in place. For example, big organizations have a lot of processes in place to make sure that everyone works secure by default. And also there are measures taken to prevent, for example, code to be pushed to production when certain security levels are not met. Then the pipeline just says, no, all right, this package, this is we can't push this product to production. This is in one of our scans, it says no, sorry.
Yeah, and I think that's a big way of selling like automated accessibility is its release confidence, right? How can I be confident that my release is suitable? Because if it's not accessible, it's not suitable.
Yeah, and really, of course, looking also in this year with the deadline of the EU Accessibility Act, the end of June, if I'm correct. Now that's just um, another measure, another good reason to step in the right direction. I meant to say,
Yeah.
leveling it with security, because
Yeah.
there are lots of rules and lots of legislation already surrounding accessibility, surrounding security. Now also accessibility is following, I would say, and this is a step in the right direction. Meaning, all right, it's taking seriously. Now we actually have legislation in place in a few months, and also I think all of the processes and measures will eventually follow. Of course, staying advocating for it is still important. There should be some champions or some people advocating for it a
Yeah,
little bit more.
I think it needs to be a human endeavor, and it needs to be done by people who want to do it. I think anyone dragging their heels, kind of doing it out of a begrudging sense of I have to, is never really going to make something truly valuable. You know, if you're not putting the passion into your product, you're going to get a very bland product. And accessibility is the humanity. You can't separate the two. So if you're just an engineer, if you're just a developer developing code, you are different from an engineer who builds something of value. And accessibility is that kind of required quality, more so than security, right? Security, you need it for a specific purpose, but with accessibility, it's a quality aspect that prevents people from actually doing the task. So it's this weird non-functional functional requirement, whereas security is completely non-functional. In fact, sometimes security itself is the barrier. Yeah, so I think it like you'll always need people who care, because if you don't care, it's not going to happen well. And regulation has that risk of making it very bland and checkboxy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at what happened with the preferences dialog on the web, like the cookie settings, companies have gone out of their way to make it inaccessible, confusing. They make it a sort of barrier to entry, and it could be so easy. Just accept or decline, carry on with your life. It would be so easy if they did that, but instead they make you open up pages and uncheck endless amount of checkboxes just to be able to say what preferences you actually want. And the regulation has to now catch up and say, oh, it's got to be as easy to decline as it is to accept, kind of thing. But you know, this is the problem with coming up with over generic regulation. So I hope that doesn't happen with the EAA. I think they're trying to be better, because they're saying, look, you need to conform to WCAG, but each territory needs to, you know, come up with their own subset of rules and how to enforce it and punishments and that kind of thing. So I think it's right that it's taking a bit of time, because they're trying to make it a bit more personal.
Did you also hear about, now that you mentioned it, every country is going to regulate it in their own way. Did you hear about Ireland?
Yeah,
And
that there could be jail time.
yeah, jail time for non-accessible.
This would be interesting. I wonder if fear mongering to that degree is. I mean, they probably are doing it as that's the maximum penalty. I don't, you know, I think sending how to determine who's at fault in an organization would also be a difficult thing. But I'm not a lawyer, so I can't speak to that. But it's interesting that they do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It sounds a bit extreme to me, but
Yeah.
well,
I wouldn't want to be the engineer there. But there are other cases where people have gone to, like there's a course, ethics in software engineering, I think I can't remember the platform, but they go through 6 case studies. One of them was with a car manufacturer, where the car manufacturer was faking data in the test environments, so that when the regulator came to inspect the CO2 emissions, the car knew it was in a test environment, knew the car was programmed to simulate behavior of being very fuel efficient when it actually wasn't.
I think this was Volkswagen. Yeah,
Yeah,
with
and
diesel. Yeah.
yeah, and people did go to jail over that. But whether the engineers were responsible, I think what happened with the engineers is they were just told to make it behave efficiently in certain conditions. So you couldn't really put the engineers at fault there. Whereas with accessibility, engineers could absolutely be at fault if, and it's not even ignorance of the law isn't an excuse. You've got to remember that. Like right now in accessibility, ignorance is an almost excusable excuse. Whereas when it comes to legal matters, ignorance is not an excuse. And that makes it far more difficult and challenging
Yeah.
for engineers, at least.
It's an interesting thing that I learned just a month ago about the Ireland jailing.
Yeah.
But well, I hope it won't get so far. And that's also, of course, there's this legislation versus ethics. Okay. Deep down, of course, as a company, as an organization, as human beings, we should care about each other, and we should care about creating accessible stuff. Legislation, I think, also looking at the more at the bright side, I would say it could be a kickstart. It could be an eye opener for some organizations.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a serious topic. There are a few times I've skipped the topic for now, but now I'm going to read up on it, and maybe it was stuck. Maybe it will stick, and maybe they will take it more seriously, also due to the legislation. But then this transition needs to happen to compliance, to more ethical, and deep down are willing to build accessible software. Yeah.
And I think just human-centered design, right? But speaking of motivation, the first thing that I've tried to do is I try to lower lift with the tools that I create for engineers. So I try to prioritize things for them. I try to make sure that I create tools. Like I created the Android Ally, which is a free plugin for Android Studio that engineers can download. I've started making a keyboard accessory for engineers, like in an IoT situation. It's very clumsily made because I'm not a C++ engineer. But that emulates a switch device, a keyboard, and it lets you control the screen reader using the keyboard interfaces. And that's one way that I've tried to do things. And that keyboard thing will work. The keyboard switch thing will work for Android and iPhone, anything that takes a keyboard, really.
This is making accessibility more accessible.
Yeah, and making it a little bit fun. I mean, like this little chip, it's called Ali Keys. This is my 3D printed little thing. This is just a thing I'm making at home. It's a teeny tiny little chip. Let me show you one of the chips here. This is a full-on little keyboard. Just doesn't have any keys, and it lets you control your phone with a website, pretty much. So lowering the lift is one thing. Education is another thing. But to really convince someone to do it, we need to inspire them. And this is what I got from a WebAIM blog the other day. He's got this triangle of motivating accessibility change. And at the bottom of the triangle is fear. And that's what a lot of people try to do, is they try to create fear to drive it. But it's the least impactful way of getting change. Inspiring people to do it for themselves is going to be the far more effective and long-term solution to actually doing this. And I think when disabled people are more integrated in society, and this is the sort of cyclical problem, when we create apps that exclude people from society, we don't integrate with them, and then we don't see them in society. And you if you start by creating accessible apps, you might see them out there in the world a little bit more and understand them a bit more, and then you'll want to create apps that are more accessible. And this is what was great with Twitter's accessibility team back in the day, is they were doing this, and through their efforts, I got inspired. So
Great. Well, maybe a good moment for us also to inspire others, and hopefully the EAA will also help with this and other initiatives. Also working through the great work that you have been doing, creating the plugins and the open source tooling. I think will also help greatly there. Last thing that I would like to discuss. So looking into the future of accessibility more. Do you see some notable trends, for example, coming up? Some things that you think, okay, these are good developments.
Well, I mean, everyone's talking about AI these days. I don't know how well AI is really going to serve humanity. I think the more we rely on humanity, the more we rely on AI, sorry, the more we rely on AI, the more humanity is going to cry out nothing about us without us. Because AI has severe limitations in terms of learning from immediate experience. It requires a massive amount of data processing power, even water, just to behave. I think if we can give it the right kind of data, like accessible code, maybe AI can start spitting out accessible code. If we give it enough context, maybe it could start doing some good suggestions for alt text, given a context. Because I think it's easy to look at a picture and get a computer to describe it. I think we could do that. But to give it the correct alt text for the meaning of the context in which it's in is a different story. And so just I see a lot of good things happening there, but I think it's early days.
Yeah, I think if I'm correct, Firefox was experimenting with this, like an on-browser LLM, which was actually inspecting images and coming up with alt text if the alt text wasn't there yet. For example, that was the experiment.
And captions. I mean, auto-generated captions aren't considered accessible, and I agree. But what they do for you is they give you most of it, and then you can go and fix it and make it so you don't have to sit there with an hour-long video and then have to write everything yourself and get the timings right perfectly. It'll do most of that for you, and then you can go and fix it. So it reduces the burden on the creator's side in an amazing way. Like,
I'm there with you. For example, I started editing some of the earlier episodes, and of course, part of it is also the transcription and making sure it's done right. And actually, like you said, a lot of it is done well, but it's not perfect. But you can change it indeed, and it makes it a lot easier to do already. So it's I actually think it's a great example of help we can get by AI. But of course, it's not
perfect. And the more AI tools we have, we could get them talking to each other, so that the captions come out even better because they're like, oh, I think this, oh, let's go back and listen. Oh, wow, okay, cool.
No, indeed. Yeah. That's I think a nice thing to take away. And yeah, I'm going to thank you for this conversation. I think we had a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah,
I
thanks
really
for
hope
having me, Tim.
to have you on another time as well, because I think we are not finished with with our conversation. I think we can go on for another hour or
Oh,
two.
I can talk about this all day. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Of course. Then let's plan that in the future for sure. What's great catching up with you again,
Yeah,
Quinten,
lovely chatting
and
to you, Tim.
yeah, thanks so much to all the listeners. If you like what we do, please consider following us, subscribing, liking, rating, whatever you would like, or leaving a comment. If that's giving some feedback. It's always welcome. We are here to improve, and also is a nice comment is always welcome as well. I'm going to thank you again, Quinten, for the conversation, and
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
until the next time. All right.